I am not sure how crazy this idea will be, but I want to take this amp and basically change the guts of the amp to something else, to AC30 style circuit. What it is a Vox NT15 head, which is a 15-watt amp with EL84 power tubes. I will take it off in a minute to show you how it looks inside. So you have two EL84s, two 12AX7 tubes, one for preamp, one for phase inverter. And that's something I really like and I really need to change into the other circuit. I don't want any bells and whistles like tremolo or 6 channels like the old Vox AC30 had. I just want one channel, which is very good, and a power amp. That's it. This amp has few controls. You have treble, middle and bass, which only work in this bright setting. On a fixed setting, it's totally bypassed. You have a master volume. I don't remember right now what kind of implementation that is, but I'm gonna change it as well. You have the triode mode, which is like 7 watts, and pentode mode, which is roughly 15 watts or more. I will try to make it a little bit more. A single EL84 tube has dissipation of 12 watts, so you should be able to get more than 15 watts from a double EL84 amp. On the back of the amp you have basically nothing. So you have a power cord socket and speaker jacks, 8 ohms and 16 ohms, and that's all I need. So that's another feature of this amp that I really like. I'm gonna show you some of the tones of the amp, and I will compare the tones with this amp below. So this amp below is something I have already built, and I want to make something similar in a smaller package and with a little higher B+ voltage to get more power and more voltage swing on the plates of the tubes. This design is very minimalistic. You have the gain knob, you have the master volume knob, which I hardly use. It's usually on maximum to have the full potential. It's a cross plane master volume, which is set along the output of the phase inverter. I have some switches to change the bypass caps on V1 stage. On the this is the switch that changes the coupling cap, so this makes it like less bass, more bass, less bass, more bass, and a bright switch which takes the bright cap in and out of the circuit, and that's it. So you basically have a gain knob in this amp, because I don't touch these anymore. It's set to the bright, and the circuit is now set to the AC30 treble circuit, which I really like. And that's what I want to do with this amp. So I'm planning to have a gain knob and master volume. Maybe we could make that switchable, so I could pull the knob and take the volume out of the circuit totally. And when it's pushed in, I will have the volume control. What I really like about this amp is how small it is, how nicely packaged it is. The aesthetics are cool. It's all metal, so it's not plastic anywhere. It's very solid. You have this triode and pentode mode, which I will barely use the triode because it gives you a lower output, and I would prefer having more power for this kind of amp. But I would say I don't like the way the preamp was designed, because in the thick option you're basically bypassing the EQ circuit, and you get lots of gain in the circuit, and it gets muddy, and it's not really useful. You could boost that with the treble booster, which will clear things up, but then you will have even more gain, and that's not very nice. This amp is also thick and dark, if you have the volume past the noon. But using a treble booster, it crunches really nicely, because this only has like one gain stage and it goes directly into the power amp. This one has two gain stages, but they don't sound really good. And the phase inverter in this amp is a cathodyne phase inverter, which I don't like that much. I prefer the typical long tail phase inverter. The bright setting will give you what it says. It's gonna be really bright, especially if you roll the master or the gain lower. You will have the controls of treble, middle and bass to tailor the sound a bit, but it's gonna be bright as hell. And you could use some dark overdrives, or set your overdrive before the amp with the tone up rolled way down to compensate for that brightness, and it will give you kind of cool sound. It's getting useful, but then you only have one sound, which is tricky to use. If you want to switch off the overdrive, you will get the amp, which is really bright and not very much useful. I would like this to be something like the amp I built before. It was built from the scratch. Basically, I took some transistor head, or it was a combo actually, and I took everything out and cut the enclosure to have a head-like structure, and it works really nice, but it's much bigger, as you can see. And I want to have a AC30 treble circuit. Now, what is AC30 treble circuit? In the 60s, you had those three versions of AC30. You had a bass, you had a normal, and you had a treble. And they differed slightly, mostly by having different coupling capacitors. And then different coupling capacitors will give you different range that is amplified. For bass versions, you will get the full spectrum of the frequency amplified, so you could use this with the bass, probably. Normal is in the middle of the way, and treble is cutting some of the bass from the circuit, which makes it more tight and more of a rock amp, and it really nicely gets into the crunch, into a lead tone with whatever you use to boost it. It's gonna be a bit dark amp, but then I'm using treble booster with Voxes, which makes them rock. can see that there is no tone control on this amp, and I will not be having tone control also, or maybe I will, I don't know. I will have 3 knobs to use or leave them blank. We will see. But there is no tone control on the amp. So what I did was hardwiring the tone control to the maximum value. So you get the brightest setting possible, and you don't need to fiddle with that. It's just set, fixed. Since we have 2 EL84s, not 4 EL84s like AC30, this will basically be a 15-watt version of the AC30. But everything else would be just like in AC30. So we will use the preamp from AC30 treble and use the power amp of, well, half of the power amp of the AC30. So we need to adjust the cathode resistor for bias to compensate for 2 tubes instead of 4, just as it was in AC30.